What if you had the chance to go out to a part of a battlefield that nobody gets to go to? A chance to go out and check out the fields, to go check out the water, check out the trenches that no one gets to take a look at except for the person that owns that piece of property. How fast would you get out your door to go see it? That's what happened to me when I got in touch with a man named Dennis. I got invited out to a large piece of property in Spotsylvania that's part of the Spotsylvania Battlefield that the National Park doesn't own, that the American Battlefield Trust doesn't own. And it's an amazing piece of property that was once in negotiation with the American Battlefield Trust, but no longer is. So as soon as he said, come on out and take a look at this, I got out as fast as I could to head up to his home and check out his property. That's where we're at right now. We're at Spotsylvania Battlefield, and I'm going to take you around to some of the most important places out here, and I'm going to take you to that property so you can see it for yourself. This is what I like to do. So hang tight. We're going to make our way through.
So as we were leaving the property closing, the attorney kind of as an, oh, by the way, handed me a manila envelope. And he said, oh, the owner wants you to have this. So I didn't think too much of it. Several days later, I thought, I wonder what's in the envelope. So I opened it up, and there was a copy of a blood-stained letter .
Today, we decided that we were going to go and tell a story that we were trying to work on a while back. I'm back in Spotsylvania because this story that I was reading about, it kind of touched my heart. And I happened across the story by visiting a cemetery and reading a sign, really. And just by accident, I was able to run into the guy that had a very, I guess, personal connection to the story. He wasn't related to the young man or anything like that. He just had a piece of property that he bought, and a mysterious envelope came with it. And along with that mysterious envelope came the story of this young man that perished in the Battle of Spotsylvania. And as he was walking through the fields with me, his own property that he owned and that he was hoping to perhaps maybe one day sell to the American Battlefield Trust so that they could preserve it, he was telling me the story about the man and about how he came across that envelope, and he told me that he didn't consider himself an owner of the property as much as he considered himself a caretaker of the story. That's what made this story important to me. It's what made me want to tell it. He's a caretaker of the story. So he gets it. He understands why these stories are so important, and to me that was pretty amazing. This man held on to this property for a very long time, and now he's ready to retire and pass it on to someone else. There were earthworks out there that I could see visibly myself. There was an old wagon road that went down the middle of his property where troops transferred back and forth from battle line to battle line. And there's a water course that runs through it as well that was described in one soldier's account of being there on that property. So it's pretty amazing, untouched property. I mean, you walk around and check it out yourself, and it really is a beautiful place to be. Hopefully one day, maybe if American Battlefield Trust doesn't want it, another caretaker will take care of it, if you will, or maybe Spotsy will handle the property and take care of it for all time. It really is a beautiful place.
I had a teacher in 1956 in grade school that told us the story of Sergeant Kirkland, and I was hooked. Since then, I've read and studied the Civil War. I'm a relic hunter. Back in the days where if you came out of the woods with less than 3 buckles and plates, you had a bad day. And you could park your car anywhere and go on anybody's property and nobody cared.
Yeah.
Those days, of course, are long gone. But
I'm not out here to tell the whole story of the Battle of Spotsylvania. I'm just here to take you to a few of the places, show you some of the more important spots, but mostly to tell the story about that soldier that I was talking about, and to take you to that location that nobody gets to access. It's a piece of property that no one gets to walk on except for the man that owns it. Gary Adelman actually got to walk on that property, and Dennis told me a story about Gary. He said that Gary went out to the stream behind his property and had bent down and had put his hands in the water, almost ritualistically. Now, if any of you know or have seen Gary Adelman, you know and can attest to the fact that Gary is always seen doing funny things. In Manassas, he put his feet in the water for a video so that he could replicate the soldiers going through the water. Mr. Adelman likes to experience his battlefields. So I assume that's what he did when he went to that property, was he experienced that battlefield.
funny story, kind of. I don't know what it was about. I'll leave it up to you to decide. But the trust came here one day.
Yeah.
And Gary Adelman was with him. And when he came here, he kind of lagged behind. And I turned around and looked, and he was bent over about right there on his knees, scooping water up as though he was christening himself or something. I don't know what it was about. It's a little weird. I didn't want to ask. Hey, Gary, what are you So I just, I don't know what that's about. And I went on up through the woods and eventually came on up there. So,
Well, Gary is such a fan of the Civil War. He's not just a historian. He's one of those guys that's so when he comes to a place for the first time like this, to him this is like Disney World. And I'm willing to bet he wanted to just be a little part of it.
I met my wife Darlene in 1992, and she lived on a piece of property that was the place where O.O. Howard was when Jackson's flank attack hit. That was a farm, cattle farm, and from that, Darlene had several cows and a bull and a couple of horses. And when her boss became ill, we tried to buy the property. And unfortunately, we didn't get it. So we moved our horses to the farm next door and sold the cows, leased the bull out, the herd bull out, and we began to look for property. The lady at the farm where we moved to told us about this property. We purchased the property, and I had no idea that there was action this far from Laurel Hill.
Okay.
We're about a mile from Laurel Hill.
Okay.
To the west of Laurel Hill. And I knew there was action from Laurel Hill back towards Fredericksburg, and of course Bloody Angle and the stories there, but I had no idea anything happened here other than the road out front is Robert E. Lee Drive, and during the war it was Shady Grove Road. And that's the road that Lee used to move his entire army, except for cavalry, from the Wilderness to Spotsylvania Courthouse. So as we were leaving the property closing, the attorney kind of as an, oh, by the way, handed me a manila envelope. And he said, oh, the owner wants you to have this. So I didn't think too much of it. Several days later, I thought, I wonder what's in the envelope. So I opened it up, and there was a copy of a blood-stained letter that a soldier had written while he lay mortally wounded on this property, 1997. The internet was just starting to come out. You had to type in www to get anywhere you wanted to go. So I was at work one day, and lunchtime, of course.
Yeah.
And so I had the soldier's name, which was J.R. Montgomery. It wasn't really his name, it was the first two initials in his name. I had the address that the letter was mailed to.
Okay.
And I had his father's name. It was the last letter as he lay dying, written to his father in Mississippi. And I had his division commander's name, which was Henry Heth. He was a carrier for Henry Heth.
Okay.
The soldier's name was James Robert Montgomery, and he signed the letter, J.R., your son, J.R. Montgomery. Through research, I determined that this soldier from Mississippi was a part of the 11th Mississippi Infantry based on where he lived and what I knew about him from the letter.
Okay.
I narrowed it down to that.
Montgomery's a very young man. He was 21 years old, I believe, whenever he came into the Confederate Army. And according to a census, he was a law student. So he was trying to become a lawyer. His father was a farmer of sorts. And according to the census that I saw, his mother wasn't in the picture. And I believe that's probably because she passed away before him. Unfortunately for him, he probably had a pretty rough life growing up, watching his family pass away of certain fevers or diseases. And then along comes the American Civil War to probably rip apart the rest of it. And he joins up and he ends up in the 11th Mississippi. But by happenstance, he becomes a courier, even though that's originally not what he was doing in the Army. He was a basic foot soldier. But the fact that he was a courier means that he was on horseback when he was hit. And his buddy Fairfax took care of him in the last few moments of his life. J.R. Montgomery thought enough of him to put him in the last few words that he wrote to his father. It's a very poignant letter.
So I wrote Stark Miller, and I explained to him that we had found this letter. I had a copy of this letter from a boy that I was certain was from the 11th Mississippi Infantry. And what can you tell me about it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, about 4 days later, I received a package about a foot thick of information on the 11th Mississippi Infantry. The Company A of the 11th Mississippi Infantry came from the University of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And that's where Montgomery was from.
Okay.
He was a 22-year-old law student at the time that he joined the Army, and that regiment or that company became Company A of the 11th Mississippi Infantry. I was able to trace Montgomery's war career. The troops arrived initially in Lynchburg, Virginia. First battle was the Battle of First Manassas. I think only 2 companies or 2 regiments took part in that battle.
Yeah.
And Company A was part of that first fighting where they fell back to Stonewall Jackson's position and held the line against the Union advance.
Okay.
Further research after all the information I gathered over the years, I concluded that Montgomery was captured during the Suffolk campaign. Lee sent part of his army towards Suffolk right around the time of Fredericksburg. Well, Montgomery was captured there while on guard duty, and he was traded in a prisoner exchange about 10 days later.
Okay.
and he was back in Richmond. And apparently he saw an ad or poster or something where carriers were needed. Well, he became a carrier for General Henry Heth,
Right.
who was still over his old regiment.
Okay.
From there, this is after Chancellorsville, so from there he served as carrier at Gettysburg, fell back to Virginia, still serving as carrier during the Mine Run campaign, and then he went home on Christmas leave that year.
Now, I've picked what I consider to be probably the roughest part of the terrain going into the angle right now. I'm at a Union Defense Work, and behind me over there you can see kind of hills going up and down, and I'm sorry for the noise. It's probably one of the worst days to come out here. It's the wind's blowing like crazy out here right now, and there's about to be a storm moving in, so try to get through this without getting my gear wet. But we're going to take you down through the hill here, and I want you to walk with me and just basically see the terrain as we're going down through here. And depending on the sound quality itself, if when I go back to editing this, the sound sounds terrible because all the wind that's blowing into the microphone, then what you'll basically get to see is the rough terrain that these soldiers had to go through in order to go to the angle. Now, as you're going through this, I just want you to put yourself in the mindset of being in a formation, shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, with your gear packed on your body. You're going towards those earthworks behind me there where the soldiers are ready and prepared to fight you. Those Confederates have muskets loaded and ready to shoot. They're waiting on you to come up over that ridge line before they open fire. And then the cannons have been going off this entire time because you're coming out of your trenches and you're headed that way. Just imagine how you'd feel being a part of that. And remember, this happened time and time again out here on these fields. Spotsylvania is not the first place, and it wouldn't be the last place that something like this took place. Now take note, if you look in front of me right now, you can't really tell the depth of things. I can't really tell, looking on my camera, what the terrain looks like. But just watch the horizon ahead.
he became friends with a person that I had only known as Fairfax.
Yeah.
He referred to him as Fairfax. Well, Fairfax was Ethelbert Fairfax,
Okay.
the son of a prominent surgeon who was also friends with General Lee. On May the 9th, federal troops under 3 divisions of federal troops under General Hancock were sitting at the Tally House about a mile back to my northwest.
Okay.
From where we sit today. They were watching wagons, supply wagons, going down the road that fronts our house. That was Shady Grove Road during the war. Today it's Robert E. Lee Drive, Route 608, Virginia Route 608. They decided to have a little fun.
Okay.
So they fired on the wagon train. Once they fired, they started receiving cannon fire from this side of the river back on them. To silence the cannon, Hancock sent some troops across a log and across a mill race to silence the cannon. The cannon limbered up, headed back to the courthouse. Grant and Meade were watching this from the Tally House with Hancock. And it gave Grant the idea to send Hancock's entire corps minus 1 division, which he had left at Todd's Tavern, across the Po to get on Lee's left flank. Those 3 divisions crossed the Po River, laid a pontoon bridge down about half a mile to our right, across the Po, in case they needed to escape quickly.
Yeah.
The troops bivouacked on this property that night. The next morning, they looked, and facing them across the Po was a large mass of troops under General Mahone, Virginia troops.
So Mahone and Heth are now starting to come up around the side there.
That's right.
Okay.
Lee, in the meantime, Lee had gotten word the night before from Wade Hampton, who was about a mile up the road, that the troops had crossed and were on his left, trying to outflank him from the left. This little triangular area, I found probably 80, 90 spent bullets in that little teeny area. I traced it straight through here where we're standing, straight through where those tall trees are. So they were headed to the pontoon. And they were shot bullets all the way through here shell fragments.
Wow.
This corner over here, I found a solid, I guess a 5-pound cannonball, solid shot, right over in the corner there, and spent bullets all the way through there. So they were coming, the Union Army had their men, Barlow's division, I guess it was, all along Shady Grove Road here, and the Heth drove them back this way towards the pontoon bridge. Laurel Hill is that tree line above this tree line here. Back that way is Laurel Hill. Back this way is the Pritchett house. Okay. And the Graves house is right there in the corner.
In 1866, out here in Spotsylvania, a call to action was sent out to all of the ladies of Spotsylvania. It was a call to try to collect funding for a place to not only memorialize the soldiers in the Confederate armies that died in and around this area, but to remove their bodies from the fields, the farm fields and the woods out here, and give them a proper burial, because they had died during the American Civil War, and they were still being dug up by accident out here on these fields. That call to action was heard. Those ladies collected enough funding, even in that time, when the American Civil War was just over, and this area was hard hit by the debt and the destruction that the Civil War caused. They were able to raise enough money to be able to put the soldiers out here on this field. They dedicated this piece of land and buried them properly, instead of allowing their bodies to lay in the fields and woods out in Spotsylvania Battlefield. So I think that's a pretty neat part of history out here. Out here at this cemetery, J.R. Montgomery is buried, most likely in an unknown cemetery plot. But I'm going to let a man named Dennis tell you the story about that. He knows more about this than I do. The man's been taking care of a piece of property that he thinks is extremely significant to the American Civil War. It's a portion of the Spotsylvania Battlefield. And I too believe that it is a very important piece of land to that battlefield. Unfortunately, others don't see it as important. But I'm going to take you out there so you can see it yourself, and you'll get to hear the story about J.R. Montgomery from Dennis.
The match was an outmatch on the Confederate side. They began to drive the Union troops back, and they drove them from the corner of our property back across our property. Ensuing fight, the Confederates were almost out of ammunition, so they were charging them with the bayonet, driving them across the property. During that ensuing retreat, Montgomery, based on a letter from his friend Fairfax to his mother, to Fairfax's mother, they were sitting on their horses, and a heavy artillery duel was taking place, and a shell exploded in their front. Montgomery slumped in the saddle.
Yeah.
Fairfax held him in the saddle and escorted them to the nearest house.
Okay.
That house sits about 50 yards to our right, and it was a home of Claiborne and Philadelphia Graves, who had moved here from Orange County, the next county over, and purchased 450 acres. That 450 acres stayed in the Graves family until 1997, when it was split up into smaller lots of about 25-acre lots. Montgomery, he escorted Montgomery to the Graves house. Montgomery asked for a piece of paper, and based on Fairfax's letter, the Graves family was very kind to him. He wrote his father his final farewell, explaining to him what had happened, that his friend Fairfax was looking after him, and that Fairfax would see that his horse was returned and his belongings were returned to Mississippi. Montgomery was taken from the Graves house to a field hospital at the home of Dr. Hicks, which is, the house still stands. And it's closer to Spotsylvania Courthouse. Fairfax looked after Montgomery every day, and he passed away on Sunday morning. And this was Friday when he was wounded. So he lived bleeding to death slowly, I'm sure, from a shoulder wound from the artillery shell. Montgomery saw that he was buried there, marked his grave, and sent a letter to Alan Montgomery, James's father, explaining to him what had happened, that the horse was and his belongings were being returned to him, and should he decide to visit his son's grave, described where he was buried. Well, Alan Montgomery was a wealthy planter. And it's a story like Job in the Bible. It's a very touching story about the family. His wife and oldest daughter, who was born in Tennessee before they moved to Mississippi, died before the war. Probably yellow fever or something, I don't know. And they were buried in Pickens, Mississippi, in the family plot. Montgomery's brother was killed at Vicksburg. He had a younger brother that was too young to go to war, who was struck by lightning while plowing a field and killed. That left Alan with two daughters. One daughter never married. The other daughter married, had two girls. Both of them died at birth. So there's no family that passed through the generations. Alan Montgomery came to Spotsylvania several years later to retrieve his son's body, to bring the remains back to Mississippi to be buried in the family plot as Montgomery had requested in his final letter. He got here, he couldn't find him. They'd been dug up and moved to the Spotsylvania Confederate Cemetery, just east of the courthouse. When they buried the soldiers at the cemetery, they had to know their regiment, their name, their regiment, and their state. If they didn't know any of those three, they buried them as unknown. Plot 10 of the unknown section, it was recorded as Montgomery, Carrier Heth's division.
So he was potentially buried out there.
In plot 10 of the unknown.
In the Mississippi area?
No, unknown.
Oh, unknown, okay.
Because they didn't know his state, they didn't know his full name,
and
they didn't know his regiment.
Yeah.
It was just Montgomery Courier Hess Division.
Okay. When I sit here talking to you, listening to you talk about this story about J.R. Montgomery, it's like he's living here in this house.
Very much so. When I was in Mississippi several years ago, I collected dirt from 5 counties and from the University of Mississippi, from the Grove,
Okay.
where they have their big parties before the football games and stuff, I understand. And from his mother and father's grave. And before I went, I collected dirt from his grave. I can't move his remains, but I did move dirt from his grave to their grave. And I took dirt from their grave in those 5 counties and the university and placed it on his grave.
Right.
When I found the letter on Montgomery, we had to name our street coming into the house for 911 purposes. There wasn't a decision to be made.
Yeah.
It had to have Montgomery's name on it.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty amazing that property like this can still exist and even be available for ABT, American Battlefield Trust, to.
well, we want very badly for them to have it. We even the time we had the deal that they walked away from, probably 4 years ago, we took $100,000 off the appraisal because we want them to have it badly. So we took $100,000 off the appraisal, and the 11th Mississippi Infantry Memorial chipped in $100,000. So that was $200,000 right off the top that we were gonna, because they want to put a monument up here. They want to use this triangular area there.
Okay.
And so we did the best we could, and they still didn't bite. So I don't know.
Okay.
going back to Gordon Ray's statement, they splashed over. Here's one of them.
Okay.
Might want to go this way. Yeah. Look at this. Got a rock going almost all the way across.
Huh.
Got another one right up there.
One right down there, yeah.
Well, no, it's not that one. That's debris. But where we came in the woods, there's another one almost like this. But this one goes further across than the other one. We're going on foot from here on.
Okay.
Just a short distance to the pontoon bridge.
Okay.
Or where it was. And I don't know about this time of year, but the Civil War road is still there. We're close. You can definitely see it when you get there. Here we go. We're on it now. Some beautiful old boulders back here, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I always envisioned was Montgomery was under one of them, you know.
Yeah.
I had all kinds of ideas going through my head. See if I can get oriented here. Here's the old road.
Okay.
This was a ford before the war.
Okay.
And the Pritchett house, you can't see it, but it's almost dead ahead that way, just over the hill.
Okay.
And the Graves house would have been back up here, about 100, maybe 200 yards up this way.
Okay.
But this is the old road bed right here.
Huh. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
This road bed that runs through here. The type of movement. This is the Union troops coming back through here, right?
Crossing the river. Well,
crossing up in this direction?
No, actually they crossed up the road the
Okay.
night before.
Okay.
And Grant or Meade decided to put a pontoon bridge here in case they needed a quick escape, which they did.
Yeah.
So.
Then they made the big skedaddle across the bridge.
Right. And this is where Ray, going back to Ray again, talked about heavy artillery coming in on the troops as they were trying to get across.
Yeah.
And one wrote about being on the other side and thinking he was safe and decided to take a break, and all of a sudden they were coming in on him, you know.
Yeah. Wow. It's like discovering something completely new. Well, we're going to hop in the car. We're going to head over to the Confederate cemetery where this young man's actually buried. And we're going to talk about the letter that he pinned back home. Dear Father, this is my last letter to you. I went into battle this evening as a courier for General Heth. I have been struck by a piece of shell, and my right shoulder is horribly mangled, and I know death is inevitable. I'm very weak, but I wrote to you because I know you would be delighted to read a word from your dying son. I know death is near, that I will die far from home and friends of my early youth, but I have friends here too, who are kind to me. My friend Fairfax will write you at my request and give you the particulars of my death. My grave will be marked so that you may visit it if you desire to do so, but is optionary with you whether you let my remains rest here or in Mississippi. I would like to rest in the graveyard with my dear mother and brothers, but it's a matter of minor importance. Let us all try to reunite in heaven. I pray my God to forgive my sins, and I feel that his promises are true, that he will forgive and save me. Give my love to all my friends. My strength fails me. My horse and my equipments will be left to you. Again, a long farewell to you. May we meet in heaven. Your dying son, J.R. Montgomery. So the thing that makes this story so dramatic is this piece of land that's right here in front of me. This is the reason why a lot of people come out here to check this place out. That and the sacrifice of soldiers and stuff, but if you take a look along here going up across this hill, this is the area of fortifications that are just ahead up over that hill and the depression in the ground, where some of the most dramatic things happened out here in Spotsylvania. At the Battle of Spotsylvania. The angle is up there ahead, and the whittled down tree that is in the Smithsonian came from this location just right ahead over there. If you're a Union soldier at the time of battle and it's raining and nasty outside and it's been miserable out here for a long time, this terrain right here is what you have to worry about crossing and going up these hills, down in the depression and up that way towards the Confederate soldiers. And they're facing cannon fire and all that, but less cannon fire because the Confederates had moved a bunch out just before that. But all those soldiers are packed in tight over there on those fortifications, and they're firing in this direction, and the most dramatic scene ever unfolds out here. We have accounts of men being turned into bullet sponges there on top of those earthworks because they were shot and killed at the top. And the entire time, with the transfer of firepower back and forth, they were being hit from both sides. You know, there was one account that Chris Mikowski said that the body had turned to what could be described as a jello form, a gelatinous form, because of how many holes were in the body and how long it had been sitting on top of these earthworks during the rain and the long time it took to get them off of there. Because honestly, if you're a soldier behind those earthworks ahead, just right out here, and men die on top of your earthworks, you're not moving them. That's one more barrier in between you and the guy that's trying to kill you. So I'm going to walk you up over there right now and let you see this terrain as I'm going up over these hills. Okay, so here we are right now. Union soldiers are coming out from the wood lines over here. And they're going to be making their way in this direction. Matter of fact, I think I see something up over there that looks a little curious to me, and I'm gonna poke my head up over there and see what it is. Yeah, so here we are out in that clearing where I was pointing to. And behind me, that's those earthworks. These are Union soldier earthworks facing the Confederates. They're only a couple of football fields away from where the enemy is right now. Here we are at those Confederate earthworks. Now, if you don't like crossing big open fields like I just did, you're taking a chance at finding a critter out there. There's plenty of paths out here for you to take, and a lot of paved areas too. So it's nice and safe to come out here and visit this battlefield. But here we are. I mean, you can see those earthworks, those Confederate earthworks all behind me here, and a bridge to help you get over top without touching the earthworks, and then to walk in this path towards where Robert E. Lee's cannons would have been placed facing the Union soldiers directly ahead of me. We're now at the location of where Robert E. Lee's cannons would have been, a large portion of them, at this deadly corner here on the field. Coming up over the hill, I can see one sticking out behind the bramble and brush right now. They haven't cleared a lot of the stuff away from these earthworks out here. You can see behind me all that heavy brush that's on top of those earthworks, and I assume the reason why is probably for preservation, because the roots in the ground help to keep the earthworks from deteriorating and washing away. But then again, some of the others across the field here are completely cleared out so that you can see them. It looks like going out across this field here, they cut down a lot of stuff in order to, I guess, to show that clearance between the two sides. And it makes it a lot easier to cross over too and experience the terrain for yourself. It's pretty cool. And like I said, I'm not gonna go over the entire history of the battle, point by point. I did do a video about a year or two ago that covers this battle in decent detail. There are some mistakes that were made in it, but I was, you know, a little bit more of a rookie back then at my studying, so I did the best I could. But I'll put the link in the description here so that you can click on that, and I'll also attach it to the end of this video so that if you want to roll right into watching that video, you just simply allow it to continue on and it'll play for you, or you can select it. It's up to you. Either way, I'd appreciate it if you give me some comments down below, some suggestions about the videos, and also subscribe. That's how we keep this thing going. So we made it out to East Angle. This location here that's represented by this lone cannon that's right behind me, this is one of Robert E. Lee's costliest mistakes near the end of the war. This would go down in history as the biggest blunder of this whole campaign here in the Overland Campaign for Lee. He has somewhere around 30 cannons placed out here at this east angle, and they call it that east angle because of the shape of the mule shoe salient. Now, he takes the cannons out on May 11th, and at the very last minute, they're ordered back into place. But by the time they lumber them up and bring them back over here, it's kind of too late. The cannons are starting to come back into place. 20,000 men from the Union soldiers, the Union lines, would come over these walls, and they are making their way over. And now, you can't really imagine what this place would have looked like back then, because the earthworks are so flat, they're so low. But back then, they would have been towering. They would have been at least as high as a person. And then there would have been lines in between, kind of like stalls for horses, if you will. And it's supposed to protect that firing that's going down the line, too, to keep the soldiers guarded and protected on either side. But these Union soldiers are pouring over these walls. By the end of May 12th, some 3,000 Confederate soldiers would be taken captive out here, prisoner of war in this area, and 20 cannons would also be turned over to the hands of the Union soldiers. Now, the Federals had plenty of cannons, plenty of men, and plenty of firepower at this point during the war. The Confederacy cannot replicate that stuff. The men are dying fast. They are being depleted from their lines because they're running away and going back home, some of them. And at this point in the war, kids that would have been 12, 13, 14 at the very beginning of the war are now being conscripted into the army. So, the scene that took place out here was one of the most horrific scenes in all of the American Civil War. I just can't imagine it. Of course, I can't do a video about Spotsylvania and talk about a soldier that died out here without going to the Bloody Angle. And that's where we're heading down towards right now, is the Bloody Angle out here at the Mule Shoe Salient. I'm telling these stories out here, you get a chance to, step in places where history was made. But sometimes you have to go to multiple locations to get the entire story put together, which is kind of what we did just the other day. We went to the Smithsonian Institute to be able to see the stump of a tree that was cut down here. It was a 22-inch tree. It was up here at the Bloody Angle, roughly where I'm at right now, and the fighting was so intense out here that the bullets passing back and forth hit that tree and chopped that tree down completely. And you can go to the Smithsonian Institute of American History right now, and you can actually see that tree on display, preserved for all time, instead of hanging out here on the field. But it's pretty amazing to see that. That wasn't uncommon during the American Civil War. Kennesaw Mountain Battlefield talked about trees being chopped down up there by the cannon fire and the gunfire that took place on Kennesaw Mountain. So imagine if you take a look at that stump, which I'm going to put up here in the video so you can see it. Imagine the entire landscape being littered with stumps just like that, because trees were felled by gunfire. So here we are at the Bloody Angle. That's it right there behind me. We're walking all along the line where the Bloody Angle would have gotten its name from. There are some monuments out here. One to South Carolina, and a few others on the other side to northern divisions and regiments and such that fought out here at Spotsylvania. Although we're telling the story of a Confederate soldier that perished out here tragically and rode back home in his last moments to his father, when I'm at the Bloody Angle, I always like to talk about Lieutenant Harvey B. Wells of the 84th Pennsylvania Volunteers. Harvey Wells wrote a description of what he saw out here at the Bloody Angle, which is the position you see in front of you right now. And he said, piles of dead is often used as a figure of speech. But in the works abandoned by the rebels, piles of dead literally and without exaggeration were lying in the compartments. 2, 3, and 4 deep, tangled up with each other. Bodies and limbs intertwined, actual heaps of dead. Their black and bloated faces upturned to the sky, in all manner of positions and decomposition, already polluting the atmosphere with a horrible stench. It was such a picture of war, horrid war, as few people, even those who make a business of war, are permitted to witness. It would take the pen of a Victor Hugo to faithfully describe such a scene of death and carnage, such a hideous and appalling holocaust of human life. I don't really think there's anything more to be said about this location. I can't imagine being a young man sitting in these trenches and watching my friends die. Well, I tell you, that description always gets me. Puts a lump in my throat. Apologize for being choked up there. Men on both sides of this war saw it that way, day in and day out. They watched their friends die, their cousins, their uncles and brothers. And unfortunately, on some battlefields, civilians died. Some women died. As this war drug on, it got worse and worse. This location that's right behind me here, the Bloody Angle. This place is one of the most described places, the gnarliest described places that I have ever read about in the American Civil War. Historian Chris Mikowski can attest to that. So we came out to Suffolk. Decided to come out here because without Suffolk, maybe we don't have the trajectory for the life of Montgomery for that story. And maybe things are a little bit different there on that property. Instead of Montgomery being on a horse and being wounded there, maybe Montgomery is somewhere else. In Suffolk is where Montgomery was taken prisoner of war. And after that day, Suffolk would be the thing that changed the course of his life forever. He becomes a courier, and as a courier, he ends up with Henry Heth on the course, headed straight for Spotsylvania, where he would take that wound that would take his life. What exactly is a life without a story? What is history? What is a piece of land? All of those things are intertwined together throughout life. This caretaker, Dennis, he's been taking care of that story and that land for quite some time. I, for one, think that property is extremely important to the Battle of Spotsylvania. And so is that story. And I'll never forget walking those grounds. It's a beautiful place. I hope you enjoyed our story. Until next time, this is History with Waffles. Make sure to come back because we're going to be covering the 160th anniversary of the surrender of Appomattox.